This much for that. First on the agenda is the 2014 final financial report, and those of us were emailed it. The York was given it. We have a stronger balance at the end of the year. Here, give it to first. So what I'd like to do is just, Dave, I know you email us like this analysis, but I want you to go ahead and review the page again with kind of how we ended up with the numbers and the carry forward going forward, and then we'll go over our projections.
Sure. As we set out, we did end the year with approximately $2.3 million, which a lot of things contributed to that together. But the highlights, as you can see there, was municipal income tax revenues were up, hotel and motel revenues were up, and a lot of things came in under the final budget. Hospitalization claims were under. Income tax refunds were under. Utilities was a big one. It was under. And we've seen some savings in oil and gasoline and fuel. Some of the other funds, the water fund came in a little bit better than anticipated. Our collections were up slightly. We've seen similar items come in under budget. Safety fund came in about the same as it was the year before. Wastewater balance dropped some, but we have a lot going on with wastewater projects right now. And the sanitation fund increased. Having $2.2 million, I mean, keep that in mind, that's about 2 months of expenses for the general fund. So it's an improvement. We're finally getting to a little bit better stable position, and we've updated the forecast. See all the numbers, 15 and forward, they haven't changed. That's still based on the 2015 budget, but we've updated the 2014 carryover balances into 15.
Dave, that's good news, and I know one of the things that I reviewed in your packet was your forecast for the general fund, because I know that's last week we talked about options of what we potentially need to look at this year for the general fund going forward, and I see that projections look a little bit better with this carryover into and through 2019. The thing that got me worried is the water fund and then the wastewater fund. And you know, we're going to have some utilities meetings to talk about it, but in lieu of the negative balances that start next year in water fund, how are we with Neptune? I know this is the beginning of the year, and I know states have been working real hard together to get the residential meters, which I think is going to down the line help this fund. Are we set up to get the ball rolling rather quickly this year so we can complete this project? And Tim, maybe you may want to interject, or Dave, whoever wants to answer that question.
I'd be happy to, Greg, and first, just to take a quick step back, I do want to express my thanks to the hard work of the different departments and the support council for. It's a concerted effort to keep an eye on costs, expenditures, take advantage of revenue sources where we can. So I think it really was a great effort that led us to our financial report for 2014. It certainly doesn't mean we're out of the woods or can start spending in a very robust way, but I think we're certainly seeing a trend of improvement and stabilization, and certainly something to build on in 2015. Your concern about the water fund, Greg has mentioned, and other council members, I think is well-founded. We certainly continue with deficit expenditures for the foreseeable future, and the projection that Dave Lewis has provided indicates in 2016 that fund actually going into the red, which obviously is something we cannot permit and will not permit. Absolutely, I think the most concrete, effective action that we can take at this time is with the meters. And we have, of course, taken that action, completed that project with the large meters. We are poised to, and already steps are in the works to move very quickly, perhaps even later this month, with getting the notifications out to residents, the first group of residents for the residential meters. To be quite honest, that it was the letters had been prepared and everything, and I kind of pulled them a little bit just to make certain. I've had a number of people read them, and I want to read it as well, just to make certain our residents, that it says what we want it to say, that it's clear in its communications. So I think our meter replacement program is, I can't say the key to turning this around. It certainly is a very important part of turning our financial position around in the water fund. And as I've mentioned to council in the past, each month we're going to start instituting a program where we actually look at either particular customers or groups that we have changed meters out, see what the change is in revenue, so that we are, if for some reason we're not experiencing the projected revenue levels that we anticipate that we will, we will be able to take action quickly one way or another. So the meters are the focus right now, absolutely.
Yeah.
What is the status of the audit that was supposed to be here this past October from the state with delinquent bills, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Is that still?
Tim, I could address that. We'll be calling a meeting. The state wants to meet with us next week for the
Well, that's what we're talking about? Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that's what I mentioned to you earlier.
Yeah, okay. I thought it was separate. So many meetings, I'll have some time to keep it up.
Yeah, that meeting will be next week for council's awareness.
Yeah, I think with in sewer, that is a little bit of the horizon's a little bit farther out. But again, we still have the deficit situations in terms of expenditures to revenue. But again, we have been very vigilant in working with EPA, and we will continue those discussions with them to, again, not cancel projects that are mandated, not go forward with those, but to schedule those in a sustainable way when our budget can reasonably support those. So I think that's what you see in that.
And that's $20 million worth of projects that we need to really focus on. That will be happening with both water and wastewater funds heading into the rather quickly. And hopefully we'll see some benefit from the new meters. But ultimately, we've got to figure out what we're going to do with that sewer fund, whether it's going back to the discussions of the $1.85 back in at some point in time in the future, if that's feasible, or other options that we need to do to increase revenue. So we need to really keep on that this year. Each utilities meeting, which we're going to be having one next week as well, to look at these further.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Last January, we created the general reserve fund, and I think we transferred 10% of our balance. Or are we going to do that again this year? I know it's just bookkeeping. I would like to see us do that again. worst comes to worst, we could always get the money back from the general reserve fund. But,
I'd like to see us do it as well, Mike. Let me take a closer look at our, see if we can absorb it. I think that's something, you're absolutely right, that we're hopeful to commit to year after year. And I certainly can look at that and see if we can do that.
And I think you guys did a great job. I mean, we had projected a deficit the whole year, and through good luck of getting more income tax and your guys' efforts on controlling your expenses, we were able to have more money than expenses this year. You guys should be congratulated.
Thank you, Mike. Going back to the general fund, we had discussions last week, I mean, we are projecting, there's deficit spending still, being in the black all the way through 2019, but we, can't continue to be razor thin, so we have to continue to go back to the issues we talked about last week and decide throughout this year what our game plan is going to be to help the health of the general fund in, the next, 5 to 10 years. We need to really think forward, and we need to, look at whether we're going to do the safety levy through real estate taxes or a wage tax increase or other options that out there. So, we do need to continue to talk about that, Tim. We need to continue to focus on the efforts of maintaining that general fund staying in black as well. So there's 3 funds that we need to work on continuously this year. Members of the committee, any other comments on the final 2014? Members of council, any questions or comments on the 2014 budget? Yes, Sean.
Tim, if we do decide to move the police department over to the justice department, is there any money in that fund to pay for those expenses if we decide to go? Or we got to scrimp if we go?
Well, I think our focus is probably best positioned on the feasibility study.
Right. I'm just saying if it comes.
And I'll be interested to see what they have to say.
Everyone will be.
I think it's something that we'll have to, it won't be easy, I suppose what will come down, what might come down to us is, looking at short-term versus long-term. And as a lot of times, these kind of decisions fall down to, and I think that more times than not, we're usually best served by looking at the moderate to long-term and solving things. But sometimes those cost more. So that's where I hesitate. But the good news is the feasibility study, my hope would be that we can be wrapping this up near the end of the first quarter. So it would be earlier enough in the year that we
can know.
Yeah, we can kind of look at our resources and try and see how we can best implement it. So end of the first quarter, beginning of the second, we should have a pretty clear indication of what what looks doable and maybe what's more difficult.
You take it off the back burner and put it on the front burner.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay. Hey, thank you for everything, your hard work, Tim. Thank you. The next subject matter, really I'm going to turn over to Tim and Gary, but it was something they wanted to put on the agenda for us, with the changes in the charter and the ability to be progressive throughout this year with getting jobs done in this city. We need to come up with a plan on how we're going to bring legislation going forward. Tim, I'd like you to start based off of your thoughts, an email sent to us, and then I know, Gary, you have some legal comments as well, too.
Thank you, Greg. Yes, I did send an email out yesterday. I've kind of thought about this issue for obviously a while, and I think it's kind of ebbed and flowed at times, and I think we had this item was important one for most of us, all of us, I think, in our discussions, seem to be part of our discussions in a lot of what we were doing last Tuesday at this time. So I wanted to step back and share just my observations, and if they're totally my observations, whether they have can be helpful for us or not, but I submit them in that spirit. I think and I think we all agree that most pieces of legislation don't require to be expedited. And when I mention expediting legislation, that would be anything out of the norm of our standard process, if you will, of a committee meeting, a sunshine meeting, and then 3 readings, and then 30 days afterwards for it to become effective. Anything outside of that would be expedited. And at this point in time, and I know Gary will have some more thoughts on it as well, but certainly with the charter as it's currently written, it appears we certainly have 2 methods of approaching expedited legislation, either through an emergency, where, as we all are very well aware of, we have 1 reading, it's declared an emergency and it becomes effective that evening, or our relatively new process of waiving readings, waiving in most cases, waiving the 2nd and 3rd reading, having 1 reading, and then if my understanding is correct, that item, if passed by council, would become effective in 30 days. So, those 3 different approaches, if you will, yield obviously different time frames. And what I'm suggesting is that if there is a way or a criteria that we all can agree to, or if there's consensus on, then when items come up, we would be able to say, well, that sounds like something we ought to do in this fashion, and we wouldn't be having that discussion would take place very early. We would have that consensus established, and then be able to go from there. Some of the, when I mentioned criteria to expedite certain legislation, I just offer there was about 5 different cases that I thought, maybe there were areas that council felt would qualify for looking at legislation in an expedited manner. And, after a year's experience and here in our community and looking at how we addressed different issues, it seemed like first and foremost, maybe items that have come to council on numerous occasions and have received either numerous approvals already in some form or another, or have been discussed at previous meetings, or something very similar to maybe Lover's Lane. I think we've talked about the Lover's Lane improvements on a number of different occasions, a lot of occasions that predate when I was here. And the thought occurred to me that maybe that would be a point in time where we would expedite future legislation, keep a project of maybe of that magnitude going. Not necessarily emergency, but maybe the waiving of the readings. Another possibility would be looking at if we clearly have legislation that saves us, saves the taxpayers money, and is very clear that it would be of a significant nature, or it would prevent the city from incurring some additional cost or penalty. Who knows what that situation might be. But that might be something that also could be considered in an expedited fashion. Table of organization changes where perhaps there's an essential service provided by a particular position that we need to keep going in an uninterrupted manner. Again, maybe that is an area where we would consider an expedited approach to that legislation. And then certainly any kind of regulatory, an item of a regulatory nature, if we need to act in order to remain in compliance or avoid a penalty, or some regulatory agency has, such as EPA or the auditor of state or whomever, is putting or threatening or maybe not threatening, suggesting that they would put a fine or something for some reason, that might also be an area that we look at. And then certainly the situations is determined by you, by council. This is your purview. This isn't the administration's. I'm only offering some suggestions. Final point, and then I'll turn it over to Gary. Again, I don't think everything, I never have thought that everything we do needs to be done in one night. This is far from the truth as it can be. My only concern is that maybe perhaps there are different circumstances where we need to consider perhaps doing something outside of our typical 3 meetings and becoming effective. Just in looking at our scheduling, for what it's worth, when we do the committee meetings, sunshine, 3 meetings, 30 days, effective process, on average, legislation takes about 72 days, what I calculated. Given the waiving the 2 meetings and it effective in 30 days, if we have a committee meeting, sunshine, and then address that item in a first reading, effective 30 days later, probably talking about 44 days. And then if we're looking obviously at an emergency situation, I suppose it could be something that could come up that evening. So, or it could be a committee and a sunshine meeting. So you could have a situation where it's 0 or 1 to 14 days. So I think that gives us, or at least I wanted to present those thoughts for discussion this evening. I think if anything, in our discussion, if we can come to consensus, I think it probably would be a good thing, because I think there's many projects, and very far-reaching projects and items that we're considering at this time and in the future that really I think are moving the city forward. I would just hate for us to get more focused on which way we're going to approach a particular piece of legislation and making certain we take the appropriate steps, the appropriate action, and moving the city forward. So those are my thoughts that hopefully are helpful with discussion. Gary, some observations on this?
The only thing I have to add, I called Judge Massio, since he sat on that committee that drew these up, to make sure I was on, that I understood, and he confirmed that Article 3, Section 3B, that if you guys want to waive the 3 readings, you got to do it by 3/4, and if you waive it that night, then 30 days later it becomes law. But the one thing I forgot to ask is, like 3/4 of you guys is 5.25 members.
Round up.
I forgot to ask whether we're rounding down or rounding up, so that's going to be my next question.
Great math says you round down, but
My own opinion would be that we round up in this case. Yeah, you're right. The test score is, I'd like to round down. or maybe something else we round down. But unfortunately, being over 5, I think we would have to round up unless there's some legal reason we wouldn't do that.
Be on the safe side, I'll always be great to round up.
I agree.
And like to go.
My only other question to Gary would be that with our waiving of the readings, if we, council decides we'll have a first reading, we're going to waive the first or second and third reading, we have 6 votes to do that, then what?
How many does it take to pass the ordinance?
Is a second action needed where we then, or council then votes on it, and it could be 4-3?
I'd say you just need 4 votes.
Simple majority.
4 votes.
That's what I indicated to the city manager, the majority rules. So if we
Because
receive,
it's not mentioned
if a
anywhere else.
motion is made to dispense with the second and third reading and it receives 6 affirmative votes, we are now having it read again for, the vote would be for the passage of the ordinance, and that's a simple majority.
It's almost like the first reading becomes the third reading.
Because before it was 5 votes, so we're eliminating one of the votes to pass it that night to a simple majority.
Because I would think if
Defeating
they
purpose.
would have wanted otherwise, then they would have,
And
go
they
to
did, so
this.
that's
and they
defeating
needed
the
section.
purpose, but that's fine.
Yeah.
My question is this, Gary. I don't understand, what, if we're going to, we waited 3 readings, why are we waiting 30 days? What's the purpose of the 30-day wait?
That, that's just how they,
That's the way.
Well, there is a reason for the 30 days.
Yeah.
If you do an emergency, it becomes effective that day, and it takes away the right of the public to do a referendum. So any ordinance we pass, it's not an emergency. The public could go get a petition before that 30-day period, and if they get enough petition, not enough signatures, they put it on the ballot, and that would stop us. That's my main concern with the emergency. I think, I don't have a concern, I think for the most part, it should get 3 readings. Very rarely should we do emergencies, but we should do this expedited thing. Tim lays out some decent guidelines, there could be others, but that wouldn't take away the right of the public to do a referendum. We got too many emergencies. I mean, like last week, we're going to hire a janitor, we're going to approve invoices and get a street sweeper, and none of those are for the immediate preservation of the public safety. And that's the only reason you should do an emergency. Tweed Avenue, that was an emergency. There are emergencies, but for the most part, we shouldn't have emergencies. But we shouldn't cost ourselves money by saying we need to do 3 readings. We shouldn't do that. And we shouldn't take away the right of the public. And doing the expedited doesn't take away the right of the public. They still can go the referendum route, and that's the main reason why I'm against the emergencies. It takes away the right of the public.
Okay, this is one of the reasons why I ran for this position. Because if you remember, the building next door, okay, next door, I think it's over here, I'm not sure, like, barriers might be off, but they made that an emergency for that building, okay? And it was for the health, preservation, and welfare of the citizens of the city of Steubenville. I would never come down there to pay my bill in the old annex building, okay? And I thought, why are they making this an emergency, okay? So everything I watched after that was an emergency for this, an emergency for that. It was like everything was so important that we had to have an emergency. As we speak, Tweed Avenue is an emergency. We turn around sometimes and we just want to make anything an emergency, and I don't feel that's correct. And it also states in this bylaw, or in our charter, that it can, okay, the health, preservation, and welfare of the citizens of Steubenville, but you got to state why it's an emergency. Okay, the roof's going to fall in on the annex building. No, I would agree with that. Okay, boom, let's go with emergency. But you just say the health, preservation, and welfare of the citizens of Steubenville, and we go with that. When we went to that, wait a minute, when we went to the municipal league meeting, what did they tell us that? They told us that you got to put more in there besides that quote. You got to put in there why. The building's going to fall, it's going to collapse, it's going to burn down because electrical wires are bad. You know, sometimes I just get out of hand, but you know, we got to state more than just the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens of Steubenville.
Yes,
Go ahead.
if I may, answer that. I've been aware of that the whole time. So if you look at every one of our emergency ordinances, there's always a reason that I've inserted in there, because that is the law. You just can't say health, safety, and welfare.
Well, for the first 2 years I was on there, I didn't see that.
Well,
I don't remember seeing it.
It's there, believe me.
But it's there in just a generic form for the preservation of the health, safety,
No,
and
no, no,
welfare.
no, no, like I.
If you pull up the one from last week, that's all they have.
Like, you know, like I named emergencies.
I mean, none of those ordinances last week are explaining why the janitor is an emergency, or why we have to pass these invoices. It had to comment, this is for the health, safety, and welfare. I mean, but going forward, like Roy's right, in that meeting the four of us went to, you have to explain, is the building going to fall in? For too long, the city, historically, long before us, has always done emergency, emergency, emergency. And we're not the only city. I did some research, and there's articles for and against expedited ordinances. But the emergency part, a lot of other cities have this, the 3/4 provision. It looks like the other cities stay away from the emergency unless it's a true emergency. I think going forward, if we're going to do an emergency, then we should be able to say, whoever brings the legislation forward should say, this is why we have the emergency. The building's going to fall in, the road needs repaired.
And Bob will question every emergency we have all the time. So to me, that's telling us that it's not there. It's not in black and white to me. It's not there. Because Bob questions each one. Every time we have an emergency, Bob will question it. Okay? And that's all I'm asking. You know, put something out there more. And like Mike said earlier, he said, okay, so you're going to have an emergency. The public can't question that. Boom, it's passed tomorrow. That's why I said when they put that building in, the new building, the new city building, the next day there was nothing the citizens could say. There was nothing they could say. It was done. And that's why I said I want to run for this position, because I'm tired of seeing emergencies go through this council.
Now, the part on the expedited settlement, I mean, not settlement, the expedited legislation, I mean, we do discuss in great detail at these committee meetings. So the public does know ahead of time what we're going to do. They know, we talk sometimes forever. I mean, those couple of legislations we passed to improve the neighborhoods, we started in January. We didn't pass them until August. So we clearly are letting the public know. But even on those, we passed them and the public had a right to do the referendum. But we do have to, there are going to be instances where we have to do the waiving of the 3, I think, if we're going to operate efficiently. We shouldn't tie ourselves into, we always have to do 3 because that's not efficient. We need to be efficient, but we also need to protect the public's right to protest what we're doing.
What did we talk about in August? And we just passed it, we tried to pass an emergency last week or something. What was that?
Then and now.
The 9 now.
Then and now we talked in the beginning of December, but then we want to go with emergency on it last week. Why didn't we do it in December? It was given to us by Kim Maricino. I had the email. Why didn't we start something then? No, we waited till January and says, okay, let's have this emergency now. Why didn't we start then? We would have had it passed by next week. That's all I'm asking. That's all I'm asking. And when I got in here, I said I was going to vote no. But now I have a little bit of help now, so it's working a little bit in my favor.
And I like Willie said the same thing. The emergencies, I sat in here a long time, and I think everybody in here can admit that the emergency legislation thing got a little bit out of control, where we were just passing everything. The perfect example was that then and now. Those invoices were from August. They were paid and everything, but we didn't even vote on them until now. Then we say it was emergency legislation. But my concern, and the charter's clear, we can do the waive 3 readings. I just don't want to get in a position where now that's going to be the out for us doing emergency legislation, but we're going to do it through this waiver of the 3 readings. If something's truly an emergency, then it's an emergency. And I do understand that sometimes, and there's one coming up right here that is going to benefit the city safety and financially. You have no choice but to do that. I mean, you're helping the city out, you're helping the citizens out. But my concern is, I believe that the people have the right. I think the 3 reading thing with the ordinances that are non-emergencies or time sensitive, 3 readings is good for the people to come down here. If they want to voice their opinion, fine, and if they don't want to come down, fine. I believe that truly we're here for them, and that's what we do. I just don't want to get in a position, and I won't let myself get in that position where we start using that waive the 3 reading thing to just expedite stuff, so we, instead of calling it an emergency, we're just going to do it the other way. That's my only concern with it. As far as the passage of some of the stuff, you know, it's necessary. Everybody knows it.
And Bob mentioned something, the wording that he just mentioned was time sensitive, and I agree with that. That's a very good point, time sensitive. But when we have committee meetings, that's when we should, okay, is this time, we should have that discussion in a committee meeting before we bring it to the floor for a couple of reasons. Because we're starting to get the reputation that we don't like each other. He's doing it because that guy's doing it. He's not doing it because he's against them guys. And so on, so. But that's we don't want to get this council, I still feel is a good body of people and trying to move everything in the right direction. So I think that the time-sensitive stuff, and there are times, and one of them I'll bring up right now is the street sweeper situation. It was in a bundle, I guess, with some other things, but that's something that the Steubenville business people asked us about 3 months ago, and we've discussed it 6 times. And so to get it where we can order that piece of equipment, we have to pass the legislation or we can't order it. So now we're at the point where we need it by April, and we wanted it by March. But we may get it by April now. But those are situations, that to me is time sensitive. We're going to spend the money, and we all know we want it. Every single councilman agrees that we need to do that. Okay? So I would say that that's time sensitive, because again, now you're given the 30 days. I just think that when we bring an ordinance in, we need to bring it in understanding before we get here, you know, how you feel about it, how Bob feels, how I feel about it, how Mike feels about it, and so on, so that we don't sit on this floor and make the whole group look like we're going in different directions. Because that's not the case 90% of the time.
And that's great. One of the things too, Kenny, on there is in talking to, you guys got this in front of you this evening, and talking to Mike Dolak, that was one of the issues with the hot mix program, because he has time sensitive dates that he's got to meet for this. And especially because we're bringing bundling in some CDBG money in there in areas to help save money for the city. So he's given us now so we could do 3 readings, and we will discuss it in a committee meeting here in a week. And I think that getting our department heads to get us the legislation to all the respective committees, have a discussion, and or at least have the 3 readings, so we can have a committee meeting or 2 in between those 3 readings will work. That, Tim, I think helps alleviate, the non-discussion, getting it like the meeting, sit in front of our desk at night of the meeting, so you got to, sunshine this. I think that getting ahead of the curve is vital for our department heads. Yes.
I would agree, and I guess reiterating or saying again some of the comments of Councilman Davis and also some of Tim, that when we discuss it in the committee meeting, and then when it's sunshine, it is our obligation to read it, thoroughly know what we've sunshine, and discuss it, and really know why we're putting it through the way that we're putting it through. I think that we do, when I say agree with Tim, I think that we do, now we are spending way too much time on how it's coming through and not what's coming through. So I really think that we should have either a plan or however it is, God bless you, if that is what your agenda is, that you need to make sure that we don't do that, then in committee meeting, we've got to make sure the committee chair knows coming out of committee meeting, it cannot come out that way. It just has to be that simple, so that we're not wasting time once we get to the meeting on whether this is going through or not. Yes, sir.
Well, okay, Katie said we discussed it 6 times. We know the street sweeper's back, correct? Okay? Why don't we discuss it 6 times? Why don't we do it the second time? Go in emergency then. Why we discuss this 6 times? Do it now. We sit here and talk about things forever. And how many times have I said this? We just go on and on and on, and all of a sudden, boom, emergency tomorrow. So that's what I'm getting at. Why 6 times? Why not the second time say, okay, we need something? We need it done now.
Bob, before I catch you real quick, to answer that, I know, Tim, that was part of putting that in the 2015 budget. That's the reason why it was discussed 6 times and waited until the budget, because we had to pass the permanent budget in December in order to do that.
We can come up with him, but he's right. It wasn't an emergency, and it shouldn't have been brought up emergency. Now, the perfect example was the week before that, we brought up something that was an emergency, and then I can't help me, Dominic, if you can, with the ordinance that you said, well, we're going to bring that up for emergency. I didn't think we were going to bring that up as an emergency.
I think it was then and now.
No, it was something else.
No, it was coming out of one of our committees, and it wasn't supposed to come out as an emergency.
And then I stood up and I said, look, wait a minute, whoa, are we voting for this or we ain't voting for it? And you said, we're going to table it. And I said, well, I'm not voting for this. And you said, well, we have to vote for it because it's on there, we have to vote.
That was the janitor.
Well, it was for the janitor.
Yes.
Perfect example. I got no problem with discussing anything and coming to a consensus. But I do have a problem, the same as Willie has, with going on and on and on and talking. Kenny brought it, you know, we discussed things for 6, 7 meetings and all of a sudden, bang, it's up there. And the money, I mean, the street sweeper, we all knew we needed a street sweeper. Everybody in here wanted a street sweeper. But that being said, we haven't had it for a long time. It's been broke down. And the only time we finally got it running for before Christmas, and that was good. But it was clearly not an emergency, and then we didn't know what we were going to do right there amongst ourselves whenever we did it. And I got no problem with discussing this, but I do have a problem with the emergency ordinance, and I don't have a problem with, like, this right here, going to that 30-day reading. I don't have a problem with that for this kind of stuff. You know, I would have a problem with this if you were going to try to pass this as an emergency ordinance, because just because something, if they know this happens every year, right?
Correct.
So it's not a surprise. It's not coming to us right now. So there's no reason in the world why this can't be brought to us in a timely fashion without us saying it's an emergency. And that's my only problem. Just because, someone else's neglect doesn't mean it's an emergency that we got to do it right now because somebody forgot to do something or didn't have time to do it.
And I agree that we got to get away from emergency real fast. I see Tim really get something to say, but we do have to keep, but do we hurt sometimes our citizens? And you're right, there's only one way to do it is to do it, just quit doing it. But do we hurt the citizens, or do we hurt a program by holding to our guns in certain situations where, you know, we maybe should have done that? And I'm not talking about something, you know, a street sweeper, but other things that might come up. We just got to keep an open mind.
Exactly.
I mean, we've done, Devonshire, other places that needed water. I think we did what we needed to do when it comes to emergency. Tweed Avenue, big emergency. 100%, I agree with that. What's on your ward? We just put the water line in. Scioto. I agree, it's an emergency. Buena Vista should have been an emergency. And we messed around with that for I don't know how long.
And it still ain't finished.
And it's still not finished, so there's what I'm saying. But never mind, I don't want to speak on it anymore. You guys do what you want to do.
Yeah, just thank you, Greg and council. Just maybe a quick clarification, just on the custodian janitor position, that was not an emergency, ever. It did not come out of, it may have been a typo,
Absolutely.
but the administration never asked for that to be an emergency. So just, just for a point of clarification. I think that the items that that I mentioned, or the criteria, and again, I think what I stated there is, and maybe I'm hearing something different, but I think it aligns with what we're all saying this evening. I think, I very rarely can I recall an item that was a mistake or something, and then we came in as an emergency. I think then and now is, and I'd have to go back and look at the process, how that came about. I think ultimately the decision for that to be a emergency was related to avoiding any findings on our audit, making certain that those items were taken care of in the 2014 end of the year closeout of the books. Council didn't agree, and that's, I accept that and understand that. But I do think that if I can call back on a lot of emergencies, I think of them, many of them, most of them, I hope, that I'm thinking back clearly, would align with these items that I suggested that we look at in terms of projects that we've looked at for a while, or money issues. I'm pleased that we have this additional way of expediting legislation. I think, my own opinion, I think unfortunately the city, before this, we really only had two ways of doing things, and they were pretty extreme. You either wait 72 days or you do it tonight. That's not where most of our legislation is by any stretch. There are certainly things that we have to do quickly, but we have to do them that night. I'm suggesting that we don't, that we can do things in a shorter time period. I agree. I think citizens' right to referendum is extremely important. We need to safeguard that. So again, I'm hopeful that this criteria, and I would ask again, if council thinks these have validity, then the administration, it would be very helpful for the administration to know that, so that we could kind of work with council, both administrative and legislative bodies, to move legislation through that, again, we feel we can save money, do some other things that perhaps don't need 72 days to go through. But again, if one or all of them or some of them have any validity, we certainly appreciate council's thoughts on that.
And Tim, if I could add, I think this thing that Mike Dolak kind of talked about, bringing it in early, you worked very hard, very diligently with us, with your staff, to get a CIP put in place, which is part of our permanent budget. Inside that CIP in our budget are items that we want to get accomplished, for example, in 2015. So, Bob, your point of this thing either happens every year, we should know about this. We've talked about a lot of those items in the CIP. When it comes time, we shouldn't have to. I agree where he's at on that point is we know about it, we've talked about it, it's in the document form, it's in our budget as line items that we potentially can't do. So if there's something that's going to come up in June, and we already have it in the CIP and in the budget, we could really attack it April, March, and start the through reading process at that point. I think that's one of the things that you've done is I shouldn't say automated, but you've really put in place proper timing and procedures for projects and our budgets through yourself and through Dave and Stacy and the finance office. So I think that'll help to alleviate some of these emergency ordinances as we pay attention to what needs to be accomplished. And I know, we got our fire chief here, Carlos worked real hard on just the fire hydrants. We know we need to do things with that, so that should come to us in relatively timely fashion. If we need to do other things with our fire hydrants. And I know other members of council may have some more questions about it. I know the mayor's been here, and he's been here for a long, long time, set up their council meetings as a council member. And as a mayor, is there anything you'd like to add to this discussion?
No, I think the discussion is going extremely well, better than what I anticipated this evening. But
Yeah,
you
little
keep
faith.
making references to the particular ordinance that Mr. Dolak has in front of you for tonight. If you look at it, the first, second, and third reading, the first reading is going to start on January 20th, the 3rd of February, then the 17th of February, and it doesn't go into effect until March 17th. However, the second line is saying that you're going to start the advertising prior to the effective date. So in reality, if you look at it as from an auditing standpoint, you're assigning resources, dollars to that particular project before it becomes effective. And how about if there is a referendum or if there is challenges to it? So I don't even know if we should go that route and start the advertising of the project. That still opens up that door of opportunity and question. So that might have to be looked at.
In there, I mentioned that tonight, we discussed it,
Yeah.
but if you don't do that,
I'm gonna,
you're going to miss, to get them out and to, before the season starts. So that's why I thought that was like a minor, something minor, but you are committing a small amount of money to advertise for it.
Have we done that in the past?
no.
Not really.
That's
but-
not an emergency.
But in regards to this one, Mike was so sensitive to all your needs in regards to this, and so he was looking for a way not to put the emergency in.
We'll state it in the ordinance, in the emergency clause. That's all I'm asking.
Well, this could
State
be a
it.
30-day read too.
That's what I was just gonna say.
That's all, just
This
state
would
it
be a
out.
perfect, this would be a perfect example of getting rid of the emergency and using the new,
Well, there's not an emergency on it, but this was gonna be a
but this is a perfect way to get the public 30 days to come in and speak against it if they feel the need to, which they won't. But at the same time, it gives us plenty of time to get the bids out and back in.
That's the direction I wanted to discuss.
Right.
That would be a good,
That's a classic example of what we should do.
And that point, and in that point, this is where when an ordinance comes before us, we should know what, okay, that, like for instance, that one right there should come before us in the way that it's written with the clause in there somehow at the end of it. An ordinance to approve and adopt the current replacement pages for codified ordinances with suggestion that council waive 3 readings, or waive the last, second 2 readings, something to that effect. It's going to be worded so when it comes, so when we get an email to us, we have the opportunity to say, okay, this is coming before us, how do we feel about it? If we have an objection, on the phone, we call and say, hey,
well,
wait
if
a
it's
minute.
in the form of the ordinance, then it is really the
Well,
emergency. So
Well, I won't put that in the form of the ordinance.
it has to be at a committee
What- yeah.
meeting and decided and brought in.
Sunshine. Every ordinance is going to be 3 readings, unless you guys say it's coming out as emergency. Like the one that I'm thinking, what I heard last week was on the water tower, right? I mean,
Maybe 1 or 2.
But they don't want emergency. They would rather that you're going to waive the second and third.
well, yeah, I know that. All I was saying is it's going to either come out as 3 reading one or as an emergency, but they'll tell me that they
When
want
it's
it as
sunshine.
when it's sunshine, just like tonight on the water
That would be
tower.
decided through the committee meetings.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. Two suggestions.
We don't like it, we can
Committee
vote no.
meeting.
Right.
I think the
I'm
committee
like, vote
meeting
no, that's all.
is critical. I mean, that's why we have committee meetings.
So how do we get to the point of waiving the second and third reading?
Well, I would suggest.
Or is it read the ordinance and then somebody make a motion after the ordinance?
Yes.
With the next read.
After the caption, and then if it receives 6 affirmative votes, then we move on for the adoption of that, and that would take 4 positive.
And I would think that a couple different ways we would address it thoroughly in the committee meeting. I think everyone was saying this, one's gonna,
I mean, that's
we're
kind
gonna waive
of-
it. And then wouldn't we want to put something on, we could put something on the agenda. Say, request to waive second and third reading.
How do you feel about it?
You know, the council would, or would remind us what we're looking at for that one. Public would see that, they'd see the agenda. So that almost gives them a little bit
I
more.
think most of the time-sensitive things that we're going to deal with come from Michael, am I correct? I mean, other than a real.
Chris.
Finance.
Well, Chris, when I say time sensitive, Mike Dolak's office puts out all these with the grants, and those are what I mean, because there's a certain day that he can apply for it, and it has to be in before a certain day. So if you vote on it now, like you're saying with this, you know, you can't really vote on it until that certain day that he's allowed to apply.
And Kenny, I think what you're saying is there might be a project that's coming up and he becomes aware of some grant funding that helps lower what the city's match is, but he has a time-sensitive nature to it. So that's what we need to consider. That's where most of it is under bikes because of trying to save the city money on road projects. And remember, he's brought in over $22 million over the last decade, of which I think we're going to have to pay about $500,000 for because he did get these grants.
And we should bring that in under the expedited 30-day waiving the two rules, because even saving money, according to the Ohio Revised Code, is not an emergency. So,
30 days, sure.
I agree, and like Kenny said, it should be well discussed in the committee meetings, so everybody knows when it comes out, you know how everybody's gonna vote. You either have enough votes that day, or
You figure it out before you come out.
Right, so nobody gets blindsided on Thursday, on Tuesday night, and say, well, I'm shocked everybody, 3 people voted no, or whatever.
I think one point too, and I appreciate you bringing it up, Greg. I think one tool we have now that we didn't have a year ago is, at this time, is the capital improvements program. We know, we have a game plan. We know what our capital projects are going to be. I certainly have asked, I have asked the department heads to review that sheet, review the CIP, and then there was another sheet that kind of listed all the different projects that we had. But I wholeheartedly agree. I think we can, at this point in time, start to bundle those, bring legislation together now as best we can, and in a little bit more routine fashion. Again, we didn't have that last year. At this time, we do have it now. So I think we can take full advantage of that and start to bring this.
Thank you. John?
I'd like to say something, 2 minutes. Next week, we're going to have a meeting with the Pride Committee. We're going to meet on a day outside of Tuesday, right?
Yes.
So I think this council should go back to committee meetings besides every Tuesday. For the commission, for the planning, rec, health board, bring back the information. I mean, I'll be frank, I'm getting tired of all these meetings and all this talking and everything done. And we're just going around in circles. I think we should have separate meetings, get the 3 committees together. We'll bring back a recommendation of what they're going to talk about, give it to council, give you 6 readings or 3 readings, and then vote on it. And get to the point.
You're absolutely right, Jan, because on our regular meeting days, we have the report of committees, and that's
Yeah,
where
right.
that should be.
That's what the committee's report, to be separate, not as a body, bring it back, bring it back, like the recreation committee meeting. Kenny brings everything back. Health commission, Dom and whoever's in charge brings everything back. And the planning commissions, that's every Monday night, they bring it back. She gives a report, we got 6 weeks to study it, and that's it. I just want to cut down these meetings, because they're long. Thank you.
Any other comments? Do you think we have a game plan, guys?
I think so.
Let's play it.
I think that it's clear that the point is well taken and well overdue, that the emergency legislation has got to be very, very small, if any at all, and use the tool that we have in the new charter to expedite if we have to. But let's know that that's what we have to do and why before we come to the floor.
Good. That's it. So we have for the finance committee meeting, I then make a motion we adjourn for that.
Second.
Good job. Good job.